The sleek silver vessel named Starcatcher hung motionless against the backdrop of stars, its advanced cloaking systems making it invisible to Earth's primitive detection methods. The ship's smooth hull reflected the pale blue glow of the planet below, creating an ethereal shimmer that would have been beautiful to observe, if anyone on Earth could have seen it. Commander Dae-ho Kim stood on the observation deck, his tall frame casting a long shadow across the polished floor. His dark eyes remained fixed on the holographic display floating before him, showing detailed scans of the planet's surface. Cities sprawled across continents, vehicles moved in organized chaos, and millions of humans went about their daily lives, completely unaware of the watchful eyes above. "Another day of observation," Ji-woo Park said, walking up beside him. Her uniform bore the markings of a first officer, and her short black hair was neatly trimmed according to Confederation regulations. "I must admit, Commander, these humans are peculiar." Dae-ho raised an eyebrow. "Peculiar how?" "Look at this." Ji-woo gestured to a particular section of the hologram. Zooming in on a construction site, they're still using combustion engines and crude metal tools, yet they've managed to build structures that reach into their upper atmosphere. Their technology is primitive, but their determination is remarkable. The commander nodded slowly, watching as the images shifted to show different aspects of human civilization. Their military forces caught his attention. Countless different types of weapons, vehicles, and strategies. While technologically inferior to the Confederation's arsenal, the sheer variety was impressive. 17 species, Dae-ho murmured, more to himself than to Ji-woo. "We've conquered 17 species across 3 spiral arms of the galaxy. None of them gave us much trouble. They all fell in line when they saw our power." "These humans seem different," Ji-woo replied, pulling up more data streams. "They fight among themselves constantly, yet they've never managed to destroy their civilization. They'd rebuild, adapt, and grow stronger. It's almost like they thrive on conflict." The observation continued for several more days. The Starcatcher's crew collected data on everything: human biology, social structures, military capabilities, and technological advancement. The more they learned, the more uncertain Dae-ho became about their standard conquest protocols. When the order came from High Command to initiate first contact, Dae-ho voiced his concerns. "High Marshal, I recommend caution with this species. They show unusual characteristics that might—" "Your concerns are noted, Commander." The High Marshal's holographic form interrupted, her voice sharp with dismissal. "Proceed with the standard ultimatum. Ambassador Lee will deliver our terms to their global governing body." Ambassador Tae-young Lee prepared for his role with the same confidence that had served the Confederation well in previous conquests. He studied human diplomatic protocols, dressed in their formal attire, and practiced their primary languages. Everything was calculated to project supreme authority and power. The day of first contact arrived with much less ceremony than the Confederation expected. Lee materialized in the middle of the United Nations General Assembly, his dramatic entrance causing an initial wave of panic that quickly settled into wary attention. Security forces raised their weapons but held their fire, showing remarkable discipline. "People of Earth," Lee began, his voice enhanced to reach every corner of the vast chamber. "I come before you as a representative of the Galactic Confederation, a union of advanced civilizations spanning 3 arms of this galaxy. We have observed your world and deemed it worthy of integration into our society." The ambassador paused, expecting gasps of awe or trembles of fear. Instead, he was met with stony silence and hard stares. "The terms are simple," he continued, somewhat unsettled by their reaction. "Submit to Confederation rule, surrender your military forces, and accept our guidance. In return, you will receive access to advanced technology and protection under our laws. Resistance is futile. We have conquered 17 other species, all more advanced than yours." What happened next would be recorded in both human and Confederation history as a pivotal moment. Instead of the expected fearful submission, the chamber erupted in laughter. Not nervous laughter, but genuine, derisive amusement. The American representative stood up, a smile still playing on his lips. "Son," he said, addressing Lee as if he were a naive child, "humanity has been fighting itself since we first picked up sticks and rocks. We've survived ice ages, plagues, world wars, and our own nuclear weapons. If you think we're going to roll over just because you show up with fancy technology, you've got another thing coming." Other representatives joined in, their unified message clear: Earth would not submit. The Chinese delegate spoke of 5,000 years of civilization that had endured countless would-be conquerors. The Russian representative mentioned how their people had defeated every empire that had ever threatened them. The Brazilian ambassador talked about humanity's spirit of independence and determination. Lee stood there, his carefully prepared speech forgotten, as representative after representative rejected the Confederation's ultimatum. Some were diplomatic, others were blunt, but all were firm in their defiance. From the Starcatcher's observation deck, Commander Daeho watched the scene unfold with a growing sense of unease. "This isn't going according to protocol," he muttered. Jiwoo's face was grim. "No, sir, it isn't. They're not afraid." "Why aren't they afraid?" As Ambassador Lee retreated from the United Nations in what could only be described as a dignified flee, Daeho's earlier doubts crystallized into certainty. The Confederation had made a terrible mistake. These humans, these supposedly primitive beings, had looked at the most powerful force in their known galaxy and laughed. "Send a message to High Command," Daeho ordered, his voice heavy with foreboding. Tell them we may have underestimated the situation, and may whatever gods they believe in help us all." High Marshal Sun Mekang stood on the bridge of her flagship, the Eternal Victory, watching as her invasion fleet emerged from hyperspace. 10,000 ships filled Earth's orbit, their sleek forms blocking out the stars. Each vessel carried enough firepower to level a city, and she had brought enough forces to conquer 10 planets. "Begin the descent," she commanded, her voice carrying the confidence of someone who had never known defeat. "Show these primitives the true meaning of power." The fleet broke formation, spreading across the globe like a metal rain. Their anti-gravity engines hummed as they pushed through the atmosphere, creating artificial auroras that lit up the sky from pole to pole. Massive warships positioned themselves above every major city on Earth: New York, London, Beijing, Moscow, Tokyo, and dozens more. Lieutenant He Jin Choi led his squadron of gravitic tanks toward what human maps identified as Central Park in New York City. The machines floated 3 feet above the ground, their advanced weapons primed and ready. He had studied the reports from previous conquests and expected this to be routine. A show of force, followed by immediate surrender. The first sign that something was wrong came when his forward sensors detected movement in the trees. Probably local wildlife, he thought, dismissing the alert. That was his first mistake. A crude projectile, what the humans called a rocket-propelled grenade, streaked out from behind a cluster of trees. It wasn't powerful enough to penetrate the tank's energy shields, but the explosion kicked up a cloud of dust and leaves, temporarily blinding their sensors. "Primitive weapons," He Jin scoffed, ordering his squadron to advance. "They can't possibly." His words cut off as the ground beneath his tank suddenly gave way. The vehicle's anti-gravity field meant nothing when there was no solid surface beneath it to repel against. 3 of his tanks plunged into cleverly concealed pits, their weapons firing uselessly into the air. "How?" He Jin shouted in frustration. They had less than an hour to prepare. "This is impossible." But the humans weren't finished. As the remaining tanks tried to regroup, the very park itself seemed to come alive with resistance. Snipers hidden in buildings picked off exposed crew members. Improvised explosives detonated in trees, showering the tanks with burning debris that confused their sensors. Even the park's drainage system had been weaponized, flooding areas to create electromagnetic disruptions in their equipment. Similar scenes played out across the globe. In London, the narrow streets became death traps for Confederation forces. In Moscow, the humans used their own abandoned vehicles as improvised bombs. In Beijing, they somehow managed to hack traffic control systems, creating gridlock that trapped advancing forces in kill zones. He Jin watched in horror as his squadron's casualties mounted. These weren't the organized formations he had trained to fight against. The humans struck from everywhere and nowhere, using everything at their disposal as weapons. They turned playground equipment into launch sites for anti-air missiles. They converted subway tunnels into underground fortresses. They even used social media to coordinate their attacks, faster than the Confederation could track. "Central Command," he reported, his voice shaking. "We are facing unexpected resistance. The humans, they're not fighting according to any known doctrine. They're not just defending. They're hunting us." The response from High Marshal Kang was cold with fury. "They are primitives with primitive weapons. Crush them." But crushing them proved impossible. For every tank the Confederation destroyed, the humans seemed to capture another. They learned with frightening speed, adapting their tactics moment by moment. They didn't retreat when their positions were overrun. They melted away only to strike again from another direction. Most disturbing of all was their attitude toward combat. Other species the Confederation had conquered fought out of duty or desperation. These humans, they seemed to relish the challenge. Their soldiers could be heard laughing as they launched ambushes. They gave nicknames to Confederation weapons and vehicles, treating the whole invasion like some sort of game. By the end of the first day, He Jin's squadron was reduced to half its original strength. The pristine park had become a graveyard of advanced technology, with burning tanks and crashed aircraft scattered among the trees. His remaining forces had taken refuge in a defensive position, but he could hear human soldiers moving in the darkness, calling out taunts and challenges. "These are not primitives," he wrote in his final report of the day. "They are not fighting for survival or resources or territory. They fight like they were born for it, like they've spent their entire history preparing for this moment. They don't just fight to win. They fight because they want to prove they can beat us. And the most terrifying part, they're enjoying every minute of it." As night fell over New York, He Jin looked at the city skyline, still mostly intact despite the day's battles. The humans hadn't surrendered. They hadn't even slowed down. And as he listened to similar reports flooding in from around the globe, he realized that High Marshal Kang's simple subjugation campaign had just become the fight of their lives. The Confederation had started this war expecting an easy victory. Instead, they had awakened something they didn't understand. A species that turned warfare into an art form, that treated invasion as an opportunity, that met overwhelming force not with fear, but with fierce joy. They had wanted to teach humanity its place in the galaxy. Instead, they were about to learn why Earth's history books were filled with wars, and why humans had survived them all. Colonel Min Jiayang paced the length of the war room, her boots making sharp sounds against the metal floor. The holographic displays surrounding her showed a stream of battlefield reports that seemed impossible, yet the evidence was undeniable. Just 3 months into what should have been a simple conquest, the humans had done the unthinkable. "Play the footage again," she ordered, her voice tight with tension. The AI brought up a recording from a fallen Confederation soldier's combat visor. The scene showed a human soldier wielding what appeared to be a Confederation plasma rifle, but something was wrong. The weapon had been crudely modified, its elegant design marred by additional components that seemed to have been welded on with primitive tools. The human soldier fired, and instead of the usual precise beam of plasma, the weapon released a wide spread of plasma bolts. The effect was devastating. Where a standard plasma rifle would have hit one target with surgical precision, this modified version took out an entire squad of Confederation troops in a single shot. "They've somehow managed to split the plasma stream," one of her technical advisors explained, his voice filled with reluctant admiration. "They're calling it a plasma shotgun. It sacrifices range and accuracy for raw destructive power at close quarters. Our engineers never even considered such a modification. It goes against all our principles of elegant weapon design. Minji's hands clenched into fists as she watched more footage. The humans weren't just using captured weapons, they were improving them, modifying them in ways that bordered on sacrilege to Confederation military doctrine. They had taken the most advanced technology in the known galaxy and turned it into something that suited their aggressive, unpredictable fighting style. Reports flooded in from every theater of war. In the Sahara Desert, human forces had adapted Confederation hover tanks to skim across the sand dunes at incredible speeds, using the terrain to launch hit-and-run attacks before disappearing into the heat haze. The tank's original pilots couldn't maintain control at such velocities, but the humans seemed to thrive on the edge of disaster. In Siberia, the Confederation's Arctic warfare units found themselves outmaneuvered by humans who had grown up fighting in the cold. They had taken the temperature-regulated combat suits meant for Confederation troops and modified them to work better in extreme conditions. Some even removed the safety limiters, pushing the technology far beyond its intended specifications. The urban battles were worst of all. Every city had become a maze of death traps and ambush points. The humans had turned their own infrastructure into weapons. Subway systems became underground highways for guerrilla forces, skyscrapers turned into vertical fortresses, and even the sewers were used to move troops and supplies unseen. "Look at this," Minji said, pulling up another report for the War Council. "They've taken our communication jamming technology and reversed it. Instead of blocking signals, they're using it to flood our networks with false information. Our troops are receiving contradictory orders, walking into traps, firing on their own units." The council chamber fell silent as they watched more footage. A human squad had somehow modified a Confederation shield generator to create a one-way barrier. They could fire out, but nothing could get in. They had turned defensive technology into an offensive weapon. "How are they learning so fast?" one of the council members asked. "It took us generations to develop these technologies. They're mastering them in weeks." Minji had a theory about that, but it chilled her to voice it. "Because they're not bound by our preconceptions. We developed our technology along careful, logical lines. They look at our weapons and don't see the centuries of refinement. They see possibilities we never imagined. They don't care about elegant solutions or perfect efficiency. They just want to know if they can make it hit harder, move faster, or kill more effectively." She brought up a map showing the current state of the war. Confederation forces that should have been advancing were instead being pushed back, forced to abandon positions they had easily taken in the initial invasion. The humans weren't just fighting back. They were learning, adapting, and improving with every battle. "We thought we were teaching them their place in the galaxy," Minji concluded, her voice heavy with realization. "Instead, they're teaching us something about warfare we never wanted to learn. They're showing us that all our advanced technology, all our refined tactics, mean nothing against an enemy who refuses to fight by the rules." The council chamber erupted in heated discussion, but Minji barely heard it. She was watching new footage coming in. Humans using Confederation gravity manipulation technology to turn buildings into weapons, repurposing medical scanners to detect troop movements through walls, even finding ways to override the safety protocols on power cores to turn them into improvised bombs. They weren't just surviving anymore. They were evolving, adapting, becoming something more dangerous than anyone in the Confederation had imagined possible. And as Minji watched another modified plasma rifle tear through Confederation defenses, she wondered if they had made a terrible mistake in teaching humanity about advanced technology. Because the humans weren't just learning. They were improving everything they touched, turning elegant weapons into brutal tools of war, and doing it all with a speed and creativity that defied explanation. The Confederation had wanted to conquer Earth. Instead, they had given humanity the means to become something far more dangerous than anyone had anticipated. General Sang-Min Cho rubbed his tired eyes as he reviewed the latest casualty reports streaming across his holographic display. The numbers didn't make sense. They couldn't make sense. Yet there they were, mocking everything he thought he knew about warfare. The general stared at the casualty figures again. His forces weren't just losing battles. They were losing their understanding of what warfare meant. The humans had turned everything, their primitive technology, their harsh environment, even their biological limitations, into advantages. "Sir," Jin Ho said quietly, "there's something else. Something worse. The humans we captured, they're not afraid. When we interrogate them, they laugh. They tell jokes. Even in defeat, they act like they're winning. Because every minute they resist, every battle they survive, they're learning more about us than we're learning about them." Sangmin finally understood the true horror of what they faced. The Confederation had expected to find a primitive species ready for conquest. Instead, they had found humanity. A species that didn't just adapt to survive, but thrived on adversity itself. Every weapon they developed, every tactic they perfected over centuries of warfare, was being turned against them by creatures who seemed to love nothing more than proving the impossible possible. "We're not fighting a war anymore," he realized aloud. "We're participating in their evolution, and they're evolving faster than we can keep up." Admiral Yoon-hee Nam stood frozen on the bridge of her flagship, staring at the sensor displays with a mixture of horror and awe. The void of space before her fleet had suddenly come alive with rippling distortions as human vessels tore through the fabric of reality. Crude, angular ships that looked like they had been welded together in a junkyard. "Impossible," she breathed, watching as more ships emerged. "Our intelligence said they were still planet-bound. They shouldn't have mastered space travel for at least another decade." The human vessels were unlike anything in the Confederation's elegant fleet. Where Confederation ships were smooth and graceful, these were blocky and aggressive, bristling with weapons cobbled together from stolen technology. Their hulls were a patchwork of materials, some stolen, some manufactured, all combined in ways that should not have worked. But they did work. They worked terrifyingly well. Multiple hyperspace signatures detected, her sensor officer reported, voice shaking. They're using our own gravitic drives, Admiral. But the energy readings are off the charts. They've somehow enhanced the efficiency by nearly 300%. Yoon-hee watched as the human fleet moved with impossible speed and precision. They had taken the Confederation's carefully refined technology and modified it without regard for safety protocols or engineering traditions. Where Confederation ships used carefully calculated power levels, the humans had simply pushed everything to its limits and beyond. "They've mounted our plasma cannons on rotating turrets," her weapons officer noted with professional dismay. "We designed those weapons for precise, single-target engagement. They've turned them into broadside batteries." The first shots were fired, and Yoon-hee's worst fears were confirmed. The modified weapons hit with devastating force, tearing through shields that should have been impenetrable. The humans had somehow amplified the weapons' power by combining them with their own primitive but effective targeting systems. "Battle stations," she ordered, though she already suspected it might be too late. "All ships, defensive formation Delta." She never finished the command. The human ships moved in ways that defied traditional space combat doctrine. They fought like wet Navy vessels from their world's oceans, executing maneuvers that should have torn their ships apart. Their crews seemed immune to the crushing forces their actions generated. "They've reversed our inertial dampeners," her chief engineer reported in disbelief. "They're using them to enhance their maneuverability instead of protecting against acceleration. The crews should be dead from the stress, but they're somehow surviving it." The battle quickly turned into chaos. Human ships darted between Confederation vessels, their crude but effective weapons tearing into hulls that had never been designed to withstand such brutal assault. They had taken sophisticated technology designed for precision and turned it into instruments of wholesale destruction. "Admiral," her communications officer called out, "we're receiving transmissions from the human ships. They're playing music, something called AC/DC and Sabaton. They're treating this like some kind of celebration." Yoon-hee watched as another of her ships exploded, its elegant design proving no match for the humans' barbaric but effective tactics. They had taken centuries of careful technological development and transformed it into something new and terrifying in a matter of months. How? She demanded of no one in particular. How did they master our technology so quickly? Ma'am, her tactical officer offered, according to our cultural studies, humans have something they call garage inventors, ordinary people who build complex machines in their homes for fun. They took our technology and treated it the same way, not as sacred designs to be respected, but as toys to be taken apart and improved. The battle continued to deteriorate. Human ships were taking damage, but they had built redundancy upon redundancy into their crude designs. Even when heavily damaged, they kept fighting. Their crews seemed to view the destruction of their ships as a challenge rather than a defeat. They're not just copying our technology, Yoon-hee realized as she watched another human vessel execute an impossible maneuver. They're reinventing it. Everything we carefully developed over centuries, they're rebuilding from scratch with their own twisted innovation. The humans had taken the Confederation's gravitic drives and modified them to achieve speeds that should have been impossible. They had combined plasma weapons with their own ballistic technology to create hybrid weapons that ignored traditional defenses. They had even found ways to use damaged systems as impromptu weapons, deliberately overloading them to create devastating effects. As her fleet began to crumble under the assault, Yoon-hee understood that this was more than just a military defeat. It was the end of an era. The Confederation had prided itself on its technological superiority, its careful development of sophisticated weapons and defenses. The humans had taken one look at that technology and said, "We can make it better." And they had done exactly that, not through careful research and refinement, but through brutal, effective innovation. They hadn't just learned to use Confederation technology. They had surpassed it in ways that would change the face of warfare forever. "Send the retreat signal," she ordered, knowing this battle was already lost. "And send a message to High Command. Tell them the humans aren't just fighting back anymore. They're hunting us, and they're using our own weapons to do it." Supreme Commander Jun Seo-kwon walked through the silent halls of the Confederation's Grand Council chamber, his footsteps echoing against the crystalline walls. The usual bustle of bureaucrats and military officials had been replaced by a heavy stillness. Everyone knew what was coming. The massive doors to the council chamber opened before him, revealing the gathered representatives of 1,000 worlds. Their faces showed a mix of fear, disbelief, and growing panic. Jun Seo approached the central podium, his weathered face illuminated by the soft glow of floating light spheres. "Members of the High Council," he began, his voice carrying across the vast chamber, "I come before you today with news that none of us ever expected to deliver. The Confederation has suffered its first major defeat in its 1,000-year history." The silence that followed was deafening. These were beings who had never known what it meant to lose. The concept itself was almost foreign to them. "In the past 11 months, human forces have pushed our fleets back across 50 light-years of space. This was not a tactical retreat, not a strategic withdrawal. It was a complete rout of our forces." Holographic displays activated around the chamber, showing the extent of their losses. Entire star systems had fallen to the human advance. Their ships, crude but devastatingly effective, had smashed through defenses that had stood for centuries. "We thought we were dealing with primitives," Jun Seo continued, his voice growing harder. "We saw their divided planet, their primitive technology, their constant conflicts, and we thought them weak. We were wrong. Those wars weren't a sign of weakness. They were training grounds. Every conflict in their history taught them something new about warfare." He brought up footage from recent battles. Human ships performing maneuvers that defied conventional physics. Ground forces using modified Confederation weapons in ways their creators had never imagined. Entire planets transformed into fortresses using a combination of stolen technology and human ingenuity. "They don't think like us," he explained. "We see technology as something to be carefully developed, refined, perfected. They see it as a tool to be used, modified, improved through trial and error. We took centuries to develop our gravitic drives. They took them apart, rebuilt them, and improved them in months. The council chamber erupted in angry mutters. One representative stood up, his ceremonial robes rustling. Surely we can simply cut them off from our technology. Without it, they'll be helpless. Jun Seo's laugh was bitter. You don't understand. They're not dependent on our technology anymore. They've learned how it works, improved it, and now they're developing their own versions. Every time we think we found a way to stop them, they adapt and come back stronger. He showed more footage. Human soldiers recovering from wounds that should have been fatal, ships surviving damage that should have destroyed them, weapons combining principles of physics in ways that their scientists had declared impossible. We awakened something, Jun Seo declared, his voice carrying the weight of terrible realization. Not just a species, but a force of nature. They don't fight like us, they don't think like us, and they certainly don't give up like us. Every defeat makes them stronger. Every victory makes them bolder. The chamber descended into chaos as council members argued and shouted. Jun Seo waited patiently until order was restored. There's more, he continued. They're not just fighting us anymore. They're exploring, learning. Every world we lose to them becomes a new frontier for their expansion. They're not interested in simply pushing us back. They want to understand everything they encounter. And they're doing it at a pace that defies comprehension. He showed images of captured Confederation worlds. Instead of destroying them, the humans had integrated with the local populations. They were teaching other species their methods, sharing their modified technology, spreading their infectious desire to improve and innovate. We thought we were the pinnacle of civilization, Jun Seo said quietly. We thought our way was the only way. The humans are proving us wrong. They're showing us that there are countless ways to solve problems, to fight battles, to explore the universe, and they will not stop. The council chamber fell silent again as the full implications sank in. The Confederation had ruled the galaxy through technological superiority and careful control. The humans represented chaos, creative, innovative, unstoppable chaos. We have two choices, Jun Seo concluded. We can continue this war and watch as they take everything we've built and transform it into something we barely recognize. Or we can sue for peace and try to understand this force we've unleashed upon the galaxy. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of species that had never known defeat, never faced a force they couldn't overcome. Because make no mistake, they will not stop with merely defeating us. They want to understand us, to learn from us, to take everything we know and make it better. And perhaps most terrifying of all, they're enjoying every minute of it. The chamber erupted in debate once again, but Jun Seo knew the decision had already been made. The Confederation had started this war thinking they were the teachers. Instead, they had become an unwilling part of humanity's greatest lesson, that nothing in the universe was beyond their reach to understand, improve, and make their own. Ambassador Song Yi Kim adjusted her formal dress uniform, a unique blend of traditional human military styling and Confederation ceremonial elements, as she prepared to address the Galactic High Council. The massive chamber, with its crystalline walls and floating light spheres, had once symbolized the Confederation's absolute power. Now it served as the meeting place for a transformed galaxy. 5 years had passed since first contact, 3 since the end of the war. The chamber looked different now, redesigned with human practicality in mind, while maintaining its alien beauty. Much like humanity itself, it represented a fusion of the old and the new, the elegant and the practical. Distinguished representatives of the galaxy, Song Yi began, her voice clear and strong. I stand before you not as a conqueror, but as a builder of bridges. 5 years ago, your ships appeared above our world, expecting an easy conquest. Instead, you found humanity. The assembled representatives shifted uncomfortably in their seats, Many of them had personally witnessed humanity's rise from a primitive species to a galactic power. The memories were still fresh. "We never wanted this war," she continued, gesturing to the holographic displays showing Earth's rapid advancement. "We were content to develop at our own pace, to reach the stars in our own time. But when forced to defend ourselves, we did what humans have always done. We adapted, we learned, and we overcame." The displays showed the progression of human space technology, from their first crude adaptations of Confederation ships to their current fleet of hybrid vessels that combined the best of both worlds. Where Confederation ships had once been purely elegant, human influence had added layers of practical innovation. "Look around you," Song-Ye said, sweeping her arm across the chamber. "In 5 years, we haven't just survived. We've thrived. We've taken your technology and improved it. We've taken your theories and expanded them. We've taken your limitations and broken through them." The evidence was everywhere. Human innovations had already begun transforming Confederation society. Their medical techniques, combining advanced technology with practical experience, had revolutionized healthcare across the galaxy. Their modified weapons had become the new standard for defense forces. Their approach to problem-solving had infected countless worlds with a new spirit of innovation. "But we're not here to dominate," Song-Ye assured them, her voice softening. "We're here to collaborate, to learn, to grow. Yes, we've proven ourselves in war, but we'd rather prove ourselves in peace. We offer friendship to those who would be friends." She paused, her expression hardening slightly. "And fair warning to those who would be enemies. Earth is not your prey. Humanity is not your conquest. We are here to stay." The chamber remained silent, absorbing her words. They had learned the hard way that humans were unlike any species they had encountered before. They didn't just fight. They evolved. They didn't just learn. They improved. They didn't just survive. They transformed everything they touched. "In the past 5 years," Song-Ye continued, "we've established trade relations with 30 former Confederation worlds. We've shared our innovations with 15 species. We've started cultural exchange programs with dozens more. This is what we prefer: building connections, sharing knowledge, growing together." The holographic displays showed scenes from various worlds. Human engineers working alongside alien technicians, human doctors teaching their techniques to Confederation medical staff, human artists collaborating with alien creators to produce entirely new forms of expression. "But make no mistake," she added, her voice carrying a note of steel. "We remember how this began. We remember the invasion, the ultimatum, the assumption that we would be easy prey. Let our victory serve as a reminder. Humanity will not bow, will not submit, will not accept limitations placed upon us by others." The phrase had already begun spreading through the galaxy. War with humans. Well, good luck with that. It wasn't just a warning. It was a fundamental truth about the species that had emerged from an unremarkable yellow star to reshape the galaxy. "The future is not Confederation or human," Song-Ye concluded, her voice rising with passion. "The future is what we build together. We bring our creativity, our adaptability, our relentless drive to improve. You bring your knowledge, your technology, your ancient wisdom. Together, we can create something greater than either of us could achieve alone." As she finished speaking, the chamber erupted in applause, not the polite, formal acknowledgement of diplomatic protocol, but genuine appreciation. The galaxy had changed. The Confederation had changed. And humanity, as always, was ready to change with it, to adapt, to grow, to reach for whatever came next. In the decades that followed, that change would reshape the galaxy in ways none could have predicted. Humanity's influence spread not through conquest, but through innovation, not through force, but through inspiration. They had arrived on the galactic stage as intended victims and emerged as reluctant teachers, showing the galaxy that there was always another way, always room for improvement, always a new frontier to explore. And if anyone ever forgot the lesson of those first 5 years, they needed only to look at Earth, A planet that had taken the best technology in the galaxy, improved it beyond recognition, and done it all in less time than most species took to adopt a new calendar. The warning remained clear. Earth was not prey, humanity was not conquerable, and anyone who thought otherwise was welcome to learn that lesson the hard way.